So I went from abstaining talking about the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6 Ultra / FE / Special Edition for like over a month, and now I'm going to talk about it twice in just a few days. If you want to get like the full kind of recap on what's going on with what is now apparently going to be known as the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6 Special Edition, probably released in South Korea and China. I'll put a link to that video in the description down below because we're going to talk about screen size and thickness and all sorts of other things. But in that video, I'm sort of talking about how there's really not a whole lot that seems special about that particular phone. But in this video, the reason for the update is that we have to potentially amend that opinion slightly because we do now have two more little pieces of information. We're going to do this out of order because this one actually came first. So it is a post from Evan Blass. This is the individual who actually kind of leaked the thickness and the screen dimensions, or screen size, I should say, parts of this rumor that we covered in the prior video. And they responded to someone in their replies. This individual said, but is it superior? It won't even have pin support. We're going to come back to that here in just a minute. This is more of a showcase for Samsung to push back against Chinese brands. That's absolutely true. It isn't going to be a flagship in any other form. I can't imagine how much worse the camera is going to be because of the thinness. Evan Blass said, listen, I'm not going to call you out here, but this is a perfect example of letting your imagination run wild based on thin rumors that you've come to accept as fact. Please use this as a learning experience. And then they attached this image. 200 megapixel wide angle camera, 2x optical quality zoom. Now, what might this mean? This might mean that this special edition will forego the 50 megapixel sensor that is in the current Z Fold 6, the same sensor they've used for a good while now, and replace it with a 200 megapixel sensor. One would assume it would be the very same 200 megapixel sensor found in the Galaxy S24 Ultra. That would make a lot of sense, and if that's the case, that would be a pretty darn big upgrade for the primary camera on this special edition. Now, I mentioned that we were going to go back to the S Pen support bit. We had heard from people like Ross Young, who is an expert in the display supply chain thing, that whole section of the tech world, and they had said that the screen being made for this thing was not going to have the S Pen digitizer, so the assumption was it won't have S Pen functionality. Of course, that is a big piece of the draw for the Z Fold 6, and so a lot of us kind of question, like, how is this a special edition? You're getting the thickness reduced to this really nice thin level that's going to put it in the same territory as something like the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, and perhaps even some of the other Chinese foldables that are even thinner than that, if I'm being honest. But at what cost? You're losing your pin, and that's kind of what sets this thing apart. Well, we have this now from Ice Universe. The special edition still supports the S Pen. Ross Young said no digitizer to reduce thickness and cost, so they have to come up with another way to make the S Pen work. And if you're wondering, how on earth will they do this? Well, there are two kinds of pins out there. There are active pins and there are passive pins. The S Pen is typically an active pin, but Samsung has actually made passive pins in the past. We only need to look at something like this. Give credit to SamTube here for this video. The Galaxy Tab S9 FE, the fan edition of the Tab S9, does in fact have, best of my knowledge, a passive pin. So basically what this means is there's no touch digitizer, or I should say there's no S Pen digitizer. There is a touch digitizer, but there's no S Pen digitizer on this device, and yet it can still do things with a pin, because basically what this pin is doing is it is acting as a finger, a touch from a finger, but in a much more precise manner by having a finer tip. So you're going to lose out on some of the S Pen functionality, right? Especially if you use like an S Pen Pro with the little gestures and things like that. But for the Z Fold device, the pen that comes with it, you should have pretty much all of that functionality. The only downside with this is that you might lose a little bit of precision. I doubt it's going to be like a massive difference. So really, I think that if that's the direction that they're willing to go, this might actually end up being pretty solid, and they could get rid of that digitizer, make it thinner, reduce the price a little bit, and kind of still end up in a similar place. Now, if these things pan out, what we now have is a Z Fold 6 that is larger, that is thinner, that has an improved primary camera, and doesn't really seem to be sacrificing on a whole lot else. And now Samsung will find themselves in a different predicament, where the people who have bought the normal Z Fold 6, who will not have access to this seemingly special edition of the Z Fold 6 in people outside of China and South Korea, we may now feel like maybe we've been shortchanged a little bit. So it's kind of a rough situation. Anytime you make a phone that's this expensive, and then only months later, you seemingly release one that might be better. And first off, that's already just annoying for people because they're like, man, I would have waited for the better one. But then you say, well, it's restricted to only these regions. The good news is most people probably won't even know that it exists. Similarly to the W series of foldables, I'll show this image again. Most people don't even know that this thing exists, but they released a W series foldable, actually two foldables, the flip and the fold, in China, and most Americans don't know that this thing exists. So it'll probably be the same thing with this thing. It'll probably be a bit better, but no one will really know that it exists. But for those that do know that it exists, that might be a little bit frustrating to know that there is indeed a better foldable in another region that you can't really get your hands on. But guys, I want to know what you think about this in the comments down below. If this thing does indeed have a passive S Pen, how well do you think that will work? If you've actually used one of these passive S Pens in the past, what was that experience like for you? Do you think that this is a tech that could actually hold up and be reasonable on this device? And how bad do you want that S24 Ultra primary sensor in your Z Fold 6? Does this irritate you? Do you not care? Hit those comments down below, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.